So this literally, unfortunately, you can't make your slides at 11 o'clock the night previous and count the number of operating systems that are going to show up because a new one spawns overnight. So Theo and OmniTI have announced OmniOS, very exciting development. So another operating system that includes DTrace. So I'm actually going to start off here by asking the same question I asked at dtrace.conf in 2008, just for, I guess, for Stephen's benefit. So how many of you here work at or below the kernel? That's below the kernel level. So hypervisors, firmware. Actually, firmware. Raise your hand. Loud and okay. Yeah, that's. Damn it. We don't have the trap didn't work. Right? We were going to have the snare for the firmware engineers, then hold them down and make them write correct firmware. That didn't work. God, it's such an elaborate ruse, and it failed. How many in the kernel? How many do kernel level work? How many do let's do databases? Great. The operating system or language environments, language runtimes, VMs, other system software. So, and application software. Great. All right, good. So you should have seen that we had hands going up for everything except for firmware. We've got the whole stack in the room. And I know a lot of you, I don't know all of you. You all don't know all of you. And I guarantee you there is someone here you don't know who is doing really interesting work pertaining to DTrace and not pertaining to DTrace, the stuff they're doing outside of DTrace. We are a self-selecting community. I mean, let's face it. We are the people who actually want to understand what these systems are doing. And it means that we have more in common than just DTrace. So I really hope that while you're here today, you're going to have some new conversations with some new people. I just want to thank our sponsors, Stone Cobra for I think the mid-morning coffee.
All the coffee.
All the coffee. Oh, sorry, they bought all the coffee. Thank you so much for all the coffee. And DEY, which I'm told I can pronounce Day. This is the new enterprise for Illumos from Garrett and crew, Garrett, Richard and crew. And I think they bought the donuts. What did they buy?
Yes.
All right, good. I'm sure they bought the cups. All right, thank you very much to those guys. Nixenta for the lunch, I believe. Thank you, Nixenta. Basho for the beer. Although I got to tell you. Basho knows that there are some beer aficionados here, and they're nervous. Deirdre has actually made them nervous. I really expect Basho to have a good showing on the beer later today. So we'll see. Basho, pressure's on. The Joint Cloud for sponsoring something. I don't know whatever.
In particular, the ad-free stream.
The ad-free stream, right? There you go. And then of course Joint for sponsoring everything else that wasn't sponsored by someone else. Huge thanks to James Halliday for the T-shirt design. I asked him kind of on a whim, and 2 hours later he had a great design that my kids at least absolutely love. Show of hands, who wants to see kid sizes in the dtrace.conf shirts? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's not just my kids. Very good. We'll do kid sizes.
The video.
That's right. That's right. Dan's kids had the video, which was terrific. So yes, this is we're actually getting that rising generation of DTrace users, and huge thanks to Deirdre for organizing DTrace.com. Deirdre, thank you very much. This absolutely emphatically would not have happened without Deirdre. When a part of the reason why has there not been a DTrace.com since 2008, and there are two reasons. One is it was really good in 2008. And I was talking to Stephen O'Grady at the end of the day, and we were reflecting on what a great conference it is. And Steve says, you realize, it's like, yeah, this year, like, okay, yeah, like, this was good. You guys did a good job. Man, next year, the year after, you can't keep it up. And I was like, oh man, you're right. God, it was just like, it fell on me like a weight. Like there's no way we can do this again. We can't do this again. We can't, I don't want to invite comparison. And so of course the years went by. And I think that fortunately, folks kind of forgot about it, I guess. Companies changed, the problems changed, and I think we realized it was time again. And an Olympiad is exactly the right cadence. So hopefully your memories of dtrace.conf are dim. Like, man, the food wasn't very good, the venue was cramped. Like, there were a lot of things we could improve upon. So I think the most important thing is that it's different this year. It's different this Olympiad because we've got different problems. And we've got different folks and a different community. A lot of folks here from dtrace.conf 2008, but a lot of new faces as well. So I just want to talk about what has happened since dtrace.conf 2008. I'm sorry, is this a bogus metric in any way? No, this is like the definitive metric of dtrace development, of course, is the D version number. I mean, what other, so no, this is obviously a highly specious metric of dtrace development, but what this is looking at is the D version number. If you run dtrace minus cat v, it will give you this number. Actually, we couldn't remember when we were supposed to bump this number, how. And every time someone would bump the number, Adam, Mike, and I would have an argument about whether it was supposed to be the micro number, the minor number. I think we all agreed that like the major number is never going to change. Finally, Adam wrote a huge blog comment that explained exactly what to do when. But whenever we introduce a new variable, for example, that could conceivably break an existing program that uses that variable, we increment the minor number, and then we increment the micro number effectively whenever there's a major change, a change that is user visible to a D program that you might want to depend on. So from 2005 to 2008, we got up to version 1.6, and then from 2008 to 2010. The version was kind of flat, or was flat actually. And I don't think it's fair to say that dtrace stagnated, but I think it is true that people were focused on other problems and how to integrate dtrace into larger systems. And then in 2010, there was the Sun was bought by Oracle, obviously. The dtrace folks, we all went different directions, and I think that was incredibly healthy for the community, for the vitality of the community, and for the underlying source. The repo of reference for dtrace shifted from Open Solaris to Illumos, and that has been actually tremendously valuable for us because it's allowed us to now, it's unlocked some innovation, and it's allowed people to do what we've always done with dtrace, which is to extend it when you have a problem that dtrace can't solve. I think we've always been very pragmatic in dtrace, and we've always tried to make dtrace solve the problem at hand. So in the last year, there has been this terrific spike in development, admittedly by this incredibly specious metric of the version number. So you got the kind of but a lot of stuff has happened in the core of dtrace in the last year. We've added the absolutely crucial, I know you can't live without it, and face it, you use it every day, log linear quantization action. Okay, admittedly this is a little arcane, but it was really critical for us at Joyent developing some software that we needed, and it would have actually, at Fishworks, I really would have used this. We added the VMregs variable. Eric Schrock added the CTF-aware print action, which if you haven't used it, you just need to use it just for the glory of using it. It really is unspeakably hot. And then a bunch of little stuff. And this was stuff that was just kind of pissing people off over the years. We allowed TraceMem to take a variable size. Most of the stuff came out of shame. This one was particularly shameful because a colleague of mine, Mark Cabbage, was in the room, who was new to dtrace, but loving it and using it to instrument the code that he was developing, was needed to use TraceMem to resolve a problem. He was in the development of LDAP. No, this was the SSH auth. Yeah, the SSH-based auth. And he's like, man, like, so, okay, how do I get TraceMem to take a variable size? I can't figure it out from the documentation. I'm like, yeah, there's kind of no way to do that. It's like, why isn't there no way? Like, that seems, boy, that's, okay, all right, yeah, I guess I understand that, but it's kind of disappointing. It is disappointing. So anyway, added a bunch of little stuff. We fixed USDT in the non-global from the global zone. We added USDT provider reaping. And Keith, I admire your ability to be civil over this issue. This is an issue that we hit at Fishworks that Keith was furious about and cursing me to no end about. But for whatever reason, that wasn't enough to get me to fix it. It was when Theo took me aside at Velocity and said, "Hey, this is really hurting us. You actually need to go fix this." So Keith, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I don't know why. Like Theo can just take me aside and whisper in my ear, and you berating me doesn't do anything. But I don't know. Negative reinforcement learning doesn't work, I guess. I don't know. Something. Anyway, that's fixed. So it's been a bunch of stuff, but there's still a ton of open problems, and that's what today is really about. Today is about not just learning how we're using dtrace and talking with the fellow folks who are using and developing dtrace, but also talking about the open problems. And I think we've got some very, very big open problems. I'm going to go through each of these briefly. I'm going to try to keep it quick because obviously I want to open this up. So I'll actually just go through each of these individually. Dynamic translators. So dynamic translators who's heard the term dynamic translators? Probably from us, probably insufferably. Who's heard it for more than 5 years? All the same hands. So DTrace, I think most of you know this, or many of you, actually, some of you may not know this. Many of you may not know this. So DTrace uses what we call translators to translate arguments from implementation detail to something that's abstracted off of that. So, for example, if you're using the I/O provider, if you are using the SCED provider in the kernel, and you're using the I/O provider and you're doing, or the SCED provider, and you're looking at cur_ps info, you are using a translator when you do that, and it's allowing you to do something that is really very dependent upon the implementation in a way that's entirely neutral to it. So, how many of you have used the SCED provider on the Mac, for example? So if you've done that, you're able to use these stable arguments in a completely different kernel implementation. And that's exactly what we were trying to do with the translator. So that worked, that was great. The problem is they are all static. The translators themselves all exist in these .d files that are in userlib dtrace. So and due to a bug actually, they had to be in userlib dtrace. We fixed that. So as a result, if you wanted to develop your own translator, and if you guys developed your own translators, very few hands are going to go up. I don't know, wherever Dave is, there's Dave. When I actually came to Joyent, and the first thing I needed to go do was develop a translator, thank God Adam and I had you write that blog entry, Dave, on how to do it, because I was looking at your blog entry on how to write a translator. It's difficult, and it requires you to deliver this static file. All of these translators come from the same source, like mitochondrial DNA. You can track the source of translators because they all have int dummy in them, which goes to Adam's first translator. Generally, if you see the word dummy in code, you're probably in Adam's code.
I was referring to myself.
That's not what you told me. Perhaps I think int dummy is a reference to all of us, Adam, and
the dummy in all of us.
It is the dummy in each of us that has not yet implemented dynamic translators. I believe the commentary that Adam was trying to make with that. It's a mess. It's just a mess, and different versions can't coexist. So if you've got two different versions of something that wants to use translators, and we've seen this with Node right now. We've got two different versions of Node. And we want to be able to translate that into stable arguments, but we have to have knowledge of two different implementations in the translator, and it's horrifically ugly. And in fact, it's so ugly that in the code that we've got in the node.d translator, Dave Pacheco at Joyent has written what reads like a suicide note about how depressed he is. I mean, you want to make sure that Dave's in a safe spot once you read this. But it's not Dave's fault, it's our fault. And the problem is that these translators are static. And we need to have dynamic translators. And we've talked about doing this for a long, long time. And this is, we would describe this as kind of at where the DTrace construction ended. And it literally stopped. This is the last integration of DTrace before the DTrace team left to start the Fishworks group, was the first phase of this work. And the idea, which is definitely not complete, the idea is that the translation definition does not exist in userlib dtrace sum.d file, that the definition for that translation is attached onto the actual thing you want to instrument, be that the application binary or the operating system kernel. And then what we should do, what we need to do, is that we generate in diff and doff. Diff is the D intermediate format. Doff is the dtrace object format. Diff is what your dtrace, your D, gets compiled into. So when you run dtrace, and actually maybe at some point later today, if diff is new to you, grab one of us and we can walk you through what that looks like. When you compile your D, it gets compiled into this very simple assembly language, effectively, that is non-Turing complete, called diff. And what we need to do is in that diff instead of having loads of offsets from structures, you need to have something symbolic that's going to translate and evoke a particular translator, the definition for which is in the DOF. So there's a lot of work that needs to do to make this happen. This is part of the reason we haven't done it yet. It requires changes at many levels of the stack. It requires changes to the compiler, pretty serious changes to the compiler. It requires serious in-kernel changes, and it requires changes to the app build chain too. So anyone who is developing a new VM, a new operating system, what have you, is going to need to change their workflow to be able to make use of dynamic translators. The good news is, such as it is, that this work has already been begun in the compiler, and I actually went. Adam, I don't know when the last time you went into this code is, but this is the last night I was going into this code, and I thought I was looking at the anyone know what the Antikythera mechanism is? So the Antikythera mechanism is this machine that was developed by the Greeks in 100 BC, and it was found in a shipwreck in 1900, and they had no idea what it was. And it took until the 50s or 60s to figure out that this thing was actually an incredibly precise calculator for the orbits of the moon, the Earth, and it predicted, they had calculated, there's an eclipse that happens every 18 years, it's got some Greek name, I can't remember, it calculates that. But it took years to figure this out. When I was in this code, I felt like I was looking at that mechanism. I'm like, I used to know what some of this was. But I honestly don't know, and actually I should go to, I actually have this email that I dug up last night that I should go to. I should pull this up here. I've got, let's see here, I think this is the one. This is this email, hopefully you can read this. An email, this is like this very tantalizing note from the past. It's like, here is, I've explained how all of this works. It's in home MWS, source dtrace USDT. It's like, oh no. No, that ship has been lost at sea. You put the mechanism on that ship sank. Crap. And it's like, it's so tantalizing. It's like, you will find my explanation for how all of this works. It's like, why? Why are you gone? Why are you gone? Where are you? And so clearly, and this is kind of where we left off. I mean, and if you look at the date on this, this is in September of 2005. So this is really, by this point, I was ignoring everything associated with DTrace, obviously, and we were beginning to ramp up on Fishworks. But I thought this is very tantalizing. If you saw my tweet last night, in order to be able to use any of this infrastructure that kind of half exists, you have to use the -xlate equals dynamic option. The most undocumented of undocumented options, because it's only in this email to me. I'm not even sure that Adam's on this email. No, Adam's not even on this email. This is just like, so yeah, anyway.
Why is this the first time I'm seeing this?
So, I think that that's good news. I mean, it is good news because the work that was done there is non-trivial. I mean, this is so substantial that we actually phased this in. And we can actually use this work, although admittedly I don't know how yet, and it's in a home directory I can't get to, but in principle it should be possible to reverse engineer how, I mean, come on, we're DTrace, we can go reverse engineer this, but we should be able to go generate a dynamic translators that will generate the diff opcodes that I was referring to, but there's no in-kernel consumer, so you're gonna hit the user kernel boundary and it's gonna stop. There is no way that compiler work is done. There's just not a chance. We will go implement the in-kernel work and probably discover that there's something substantial missing from that compiler work, and we'll need to go back into the compiler. There's a lot of work to do on this problem, but we have to solve it. This is crushing us. I think us as a broader community, it is crushing us at Joyent. We see this every day because it limits what people can do in the non-global zone, right? When you're in the non-global zone and you want to get like your FDs, right? You want to get your FD info on an open, which is totally a reasonable thing to do. Absent dynamic translators, the ways to do that are very, very stinky. You can find a way to solve that problem without dynamic translators. So people understand what I'm talking about, that if you use the syscall provider, for example, from the non-global zone, on an Illumos derived system, and you want to understand what the path name is for a file that you're reading from. Seems like a reasonable thing. You would use the FDs array to do that, right? Which is a translator. But that translator goes off, if you look at the implementation of that translator, it's going from curthread to tproc, from tproc to the ufinfo and finding your open file and getting the vpath out of that, which you can't allow someone to do in the non-global zone. So the dynamic translators, I mean, I think, but maybe I'm wrong, but I think dynamic translators are the right way to solve that problem. That's a hard problem, it seems to me. I like the fact that Adam just took out his notebook. That's a good sign. Maybe Adam's going to solve this. But I think that we want to go solve that problem. We've got to go solve the different versioning problem. And more generally, we've got to get upstack more convincingly. So I hope we're going to talk a lot more about this at some point in time later today. So this is just to kind of tease this in. But dynamic translators are something we have to solve in the coming Olympiad. Before this Olympiad is out. We must put a translator in the kernel and return him safely to user. No, stop.
Wrong demographic.
Wrong demographic, right, sorry. Right. Never mind. All right.
Entirely.
Okay, instrumenting up into guests. There are several DTrace enabled systems, not least is Illumos, that have support for hardware-based virtualization. We really need to be able to extend DTrace to get up into the guests. And Brendan Gregg, who's sitting down here, you all know Brendan from his terrific DTrace book. Brendan has been feeling the pain of this, trying to understand guest performance. Brendan has had to do the unthinkable to actually understand what these guests are doing. Brendan has had to run system tab. And I can tell you, as one of Brendan's coworkers, it is in your self-interest for Brendan not to be running system tab. Just because Brendan, as part of his self-defense mechanism for dealing with system tab, has to vocalize all of his pain. And as someone who cares about Brendan's mental health and well-being, you want to encourage this vocalization. You know that bottling that rage up is corrosive. But as someone who has to be right next to it, you really wonder if there's another way. So we need to.
Entertainment value?
It had it's like a bad movie, right? I mean, it's like, what entertainment value is it? It's kind of funny to hear someone describe a bad movie, but sitting through, I mean, there's no entertainment value in sitting through Gigli, right? I am one of 5 people in the world who sat through Gigli. At least multiples of the others are in this room, but there is no entertainment value in it. We've got to go solve it. We've got to allow DTrace to get up into the guest. More questions here than answers, for sure. It does seem that that the guest is just executing on physical memory. We own physical memory. If you're the host, you own physical memory. Let's go muck with physical memory and induce an exit. And when you induce an exit, the hardware's got great support for hardware virtualization. You induce an exit, you're the kernel, we're the kernel, we should be able to pick up the pieces and figure out what's going on and keep reality, keep the keel in the water. And of course, if we don't, it fails spectacularly, but that's the DTrace way. So I think that we should be able to do this. Do we need guest cooperation? I think the answer to that is probably yes, but maybe not. What would the mechanism for guest cooperation be? Maybe it would look a lot like the dynamic translators. I don't know.
I think dynamic translation is the way to get there, right?
I think that dynamic translation seems like the same problem. The hardware virtualized guests and the VMs, JavaScript, Erlang, Ruby, Python, what have you, seem like similar problems. They seem like two ends of the same problem. I hope we're going to talk about that today because I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there. Another thing that I want to, and this maybe less to talk about here today on this, dynamic USDT providers. So historically, when we developed USDT, it was designed to be a compile time phenomenon. When you create your application, you would create with it a USDT provider, possibly a translator, reading Dave's blog carefully, adding the int dummy because you don't know what it does, just copying and pasting, putting it all together and creating a USDT provider. This was obviously very valuable, and this is the way we create a lot of USDT providers. A guy in the community, Chris Andrews, had actually a very good idea and managed to implement this without actually talking to us at all, just from the code. What Chris did is realize that we're actually just passing down this DOF, the DTrace object format. You could actually generate that on the fly. So you don't need to generate that as a compile step. You could just, the DOF is just binary, right? You can just cons up the DOF and ioctl that down, and it allows you to create a provider entirely dynamically, which is a really cool idea. And he did that. I think the first one was for Perl maybe, or maybe for Ruby, I can't remember. But he's done it for Ruby and Perl and Node. And we know this is a good idea because we're using this extensively. Mark did this in Mark's Restify, the Node Restify. Part of the value of Node Restify is that you get dtrace probes when you're using your Node program. And using the traditional way of doing USDT probes doesn't get you there. So we were talking with a joint customer of ours who wants to be able to go instrument. They're using Rails like many folks, and they want to instrument Rails way up the stack so they can understand their end-to-end latency. The way to do that is not via a traditional USDT provider. The way to do that is via a dynamic USDT provider. This all works today. My question is, should we be supporting it better? Can we be supported better? Keith ran into a bug recently that I think it is a bug in DTrace as well, was a bug in the provider, in that it allowed you to try to register the provider twice, and then bad things happened. So I think that, I don't know. This is just kind of a question I'm asking, and hopefully something we can think about today. And I'd be very curious what other folks are doing and how they're using it, and what's the overlap here with dynamic translators. I don't know the answer to that either. Integrating with a big sigh, integrating with user level CTF, this is a hard problem. People know what CTF is. A lot of heads nodding, maybe not all heads nodding. So CTF is the compact C type format, so compact that it's eliminated one of the C's, which, okay, not my joke. But CTF was really huge for DTrace. CTF is what allowed us to describe the types of the system in a compact binary format, which before CTF you were looking at dwarf and stabs. And dwarf is inhumane. I know that several in the room have suffered with dwarf. I don't think you disagree with that. And at the time we had stabs, and stabs are incredibly verbose and really a very crude first attempt at the problem. CTF is a much, much, much cleaner, more compact representation of that. We use that extensively in DTrace. DTrace depends on CTF. If you've ported DTrace to a different platform, you've had to deal with CTF. And whether you've stubbed it out or whether you've implemented it, you've had to deal with it. So CTF is really key to DTrace, but we only use CTF for the kernel. We don't use user-level CTF. And user-level CTF is huge, by the way. If you're developing an app on a platform that supports CTF and you are not shipping that binary with CTF, you're doing yourself an injustice, a disservice. Because when you've got a core dump, oh my God, is it useful to be able to actually have all those types present. So user-level CTF is a hugely helpful on those platforms that have it. We don't use it in DTrace. It's hard to use it. This is something that if you're curious about it, Adam, I don't know if you plan to speak about this at all today, but this is a problem that we've talked about. Because it is in theory possible. Now, you're supposed to say, when I say in theory, you're supposed to say, in theory, Marge, in theory. In theory, communism works. Am I getting that quote right? Can I? Anyway, whatever. Simpsons reference, bad Simpsons reference. It is in theory possible. I think it practically is very difficult. Knowing the types of arguments to PID provider probes seems really nasty to me. But I don't know, maybe you make a first cut using user-level CTF without this. I don't know how badly people want this. What this will allow you to do, by the way, is dtrace -n, PID, $myPID, my function return, my function entry, and then trace in terms of the arguments, or look at a global object in terms of its type.
And use print?
What's that?
And use print?
Yeah, exactly. So you could use print. Right, print actually would print is definitely the easy half or the easy 1/1 millionth of this problem. That's right. Right, Schrock is done. Schrock's like, print and I'm out of here. So yeah, Schrock's done his part. Why haven't we done our part? That's what we need to ask ourselves. But yeah, you'd have print, which would be huge. Now, one question I have is how much does this, how needed is this in a world where things are so much more complicated than just CTF anyway, right? It's like how much of this, the applications that people are looking at are in C++, and then, yeah, I know, well, C++ makes it, CTF is basically, I should say impossible, very difficult with C++, not solved. I don't know, what would it be to take, I would love to take C++ and turn that into something that CTF could consume. But that's going to require emasculating C++, I think, in a way that would be productive for humanity. But so, I don't know. Again, lots more questions than answers, and I hope we talk about this later today. If you do this implicitly, do we take a swing at the implicit copying problems? Probably we've talked about off and on for the years. Right now, you've got to use copying, and if you're a DTrace user, a new DTrace user that's instrumenting your process, I mean, it really is kind of inhumane that the first thing you've got to go do is like, copy in, where am I? Wait a minute, what's going on? Like, don't worry, just write the word copy in. Just cut and paste from the web page, dude. It's like, but what am I doing? It's like, don't worry about it. And especially like if you need to go to actually dereference pointers in userland, I mean, it's brutal. It's so easy to get yourself derailed. You've got the model, the in-kernel model differs from the user level model. It's brutal, 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 brutal. We can do a lot better, but it's hard. So again, maybe we'll talk about that. I hope we will talk about that more today. This one is probably, I did do this kind of in order of what I view the importance to be. I view dynamic translators as something we absolutely must do. And then we kind of get more elective. Here we admittedly get deeply into the elective, but speaking personally, postmortem, how many people have used postmortem dtrace? Okay, so postmortem dtrace, like a lot of features of dtrace, you're like, why is that there? Why do I care about that? And then it saves your ass. Postmortem dtrace has absolutely, speaking personally, I made a huge mistake about 4 months ago. I tempted the gods, and I'm going to try to never do this again in my life. But I was on stage at QCon, and I was talking about our ability to debug production systems, and I made a huge mistake, and I'm so sorry. Keep apologizing for this, and you're not listening. I said that our post-mortem debugging technology was so sufficiently advanced that from a single operating system core dump, we could debug any problem. Which is not true, and I know that's not true. And I basically knew that wasn't true at the time. And I agree, like that should be punished. Like, listen, I have to say, I'm not generally a religious guy. I'm beginning to wonder if there isn't a God, because God knows if I were in his shoes, I would do exactly what he appeared to do for the last couple of months, which is like, hey, you, yeah, all right, let's give you one of these, one of these, one of those, one of these, one of these, one of these. I hope I've done enough. We had a series of non-reproducible psychotic bugs. And I've always said that bugs can be psychotic or non-reproducible, but not both. And I got absolutely demolished by a conga line of bugs that were both psychotic and non-reproducible. When you do have a bug that is psychotic and non-reproducible, the only way to debug it is with postmortem dtrace, as far as I'm concerned, because what you are able to do in that production set is the only way to iterate on hypotheses, because you can go into systems that have been deployed in the field and you can change how they're being instrumented without having to restart or disrupt them, and then let them run, and then if they die, you've got the data. And that was essential for us on cracking some really, really nasty bugs. The last bugs of KVM, really brutal. And they were psychotic and non-reproducible. So this is one of those things you don't care about until it saves your butt. It's not at user level, right? We only do this for the kernel. We could do it for userland. So we could have you have a dtrace enabling that -p on a process, and when that guy dies, we can automatically take the in-kernel ring buffers, glom that onto the core file, and then you could use MDB later, and MDB's colon dtrace to debug it. Theo, would this be useful to you?
Probably.
Okay. So if Theo doesn't need this, then we don't need to do it. But if it would be useful to Theo, it'd probably be useful to more folks as well. I mean, I don't know. If folks think this would be useful, it's something we can explore. It's some work, but this is actually just kind of fun stuff.
With CTF.
What's that?
With CTF and C++.
Yeah, damn it. Why do I have to do that first? Yeah, so, and which probably, that probably is a more important problem, right? The CTF, and this is really in order of its importance. And then instrumenting multiple processes, again, something we may get to today. I don't know if people want to talk about it or not. This is the ability to follow on fork. Boy, it seems like that would be useful. It's really, really, really nasty. And it gets you into a lot of weird corner cases. What does $target mean? And we actually we whiteboarded this out a while ago and then got to...
It went insane.
It went insane. It was like one of those choose your own adventures where you only die. Inside UFO 5440, everyone meet, did you ever read this as a kid? Inside UFO 5440? This is the choose your own adventure where everybody died. It's because you didn't suffer through Inside UFO 5440. All right, fine.
4 years ago.
All right.